Everybody watches the judge. Everybody argues about the prosecutor. Everybody debates the investigator. But the truth is, the system doesn't move on speeches, it moves on paper. And the papers move through one office, the clerk. Tonight's episode is not about calling names, it's not about alleging crimes, it's about a simple, documented reality. Court speaks through their record, and clerks control their record. What exists in the file, what's missing from the file, what gets transmitted, what gets delayed, that can shape jurisdictions, appeals, and constitutional rights without a single person ever raising their voice. Now, here's the foundational legal truth that sets the stage, y'all. Okay? Jurisdiction, appellate rights, and the ability to confront the state do not move by judicial will alone. They move through the clerk. The clerk is vital in the judicial process because if it's not in the file, it doesn't exist. If it's not in the file, it never happened. Right? Regardless of what it is, from the charge, from the accusations, to the warrants, to motions, anything that is not recorded in the file, no judge can rule on it, not even the presiding judge over the case, because they have to have the file, right? And this is under Georgia law, OCGA, subsection 15-6-61. The clerk is the custodian of the records and filings. They are the gatekeeper. They are the guardian. The judge has no power over the clerk. And that's the misconception most people think. People think the clerk works for the judge. No. The clerk has their own constitutional power. They don't answer to anyone. Their job is to make sure whatever is said in court, whatever is done from A to Z in that file, it goes in there. And it must be documented, it must be time-stamped, it must be labeled, it must be clear. The file cannot be speculative. It should be clear-cut. When you look at a docket, and I'm going to show you guys here shortly, when you look at a docket, it should be clear as to what each file in that docket is. And it should be time-stamped, it should be dated, and it should be in chronological order. You should not be backdating stuff. You should not be putting stuff in there that was a year later. Like if a clerk is adding stuff to a file a year later, that's poor bookkeeping. Now, in the around the gray area, because when it comes down to a situation occurs and they need that particular item and it's not in the file, it never happened. Even if it happened, judges operate in a vacuum. Everything in that file is what happened. If it's not in there, if it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't line up, it didn't happen. And that's key and critical when you're talking about prosecution. Because it's the state's burden of proof to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you did what they accuse you of doing. And they have to prove that by law, by not only statutory law, but procedural law. There's procedures that you have to go by. And they're put in place to make sure justice is fair, that justice is blind, that everybody gets the same swing at the bat. But when you have systems where you got a 50-year sheriff, 30-year judge, 50-year clerk, and now you got a clerk that now, the head clerk now, came up in the ranks in that office. Common practice, the culture, the habits, right? And we're going to get into that. Also, OCGA subsection 5-6-43, the clerks controls transmission and appeal of records. 5-6-37, once a notice of appeal is filed, jurisdiction shifts, the trial court authority is limited. See, this is key. So if a client or defendant files a notice of appeal, not that the Georgia Court of Appeal or the United States Supreme Court or whomever, it's not that their file is under appeal, it's the fact that this defendant has given notice of appeal. And once notice is given, the file is dead. Jurisdiction it no longer resides in that court, and the clerk is in control of that. Once that notice of appeal comes in, the clerk puts a stop on that file from anyone. The defendant, themselves, The judges, DAs, no one can add anything to that file because it's out of their jurisdiction. Once notice of appeal is presented and received, jurisdiction now shifts to the whatever court is going to, whatever that appeal is going to. If it's going to the Georgia Court of Appeal, that superior court in that county no longer has jurisdiction. That judge cannot. Their orders are void at that point. And if they do make an order, it's a clerk job to note it. Hey, judge, this order is void. This file is under appeal. But if you got a clerk who's been there 50 years, you got a judge who's been there 50 years, and no one likes their cases to get appealed. You guys have seen it on TV. No judge wants to lose a case on appeal. So sometimes things happen that they're going, there's some things that happen to make sure that they don't get appealed. And we're going to get into that as well, okay? All right? So the clerk doesn't rule. So the clerk is a neutral position. They don't rule. They're unbiased. They don't care if you did it or not. All they do, their job is to put it on the record. But the clerk can decide what exists, when it exists, and where it exists, because the clerk controls the official record all across the board, criminal and civil. And when the record is incomplete, fragmented, or delayed, this is not just clerical. That's constitutional. You can't say I made a clerical error. Oh, I forgot something. Oh, I didn't do this. Clerks say an oath to uphold the record. That's their job. Their job is not to be a gatekeeper. Their job is not to dispute what a defendant is saying. And this goes for future references as far as yourself as well. You have situations, you have to go down to that clerk's office. The clerk has no control. The clerk is there to provide you what's on the record. And if it's on the record, it's public record, right? Let's be clear about that, because we all know we've been in situations, you go to that clerk's office and they act like they're God. They act like that is their file. It's not theirs. And according to Georgia law, they know this. And when you have systems and you have continuity, people have been in position for decades and decades and decades. And then right after they retire, they bring their protege up who they train and groom to do the exact same thing that they've done for the last 50 years. Where's the justice? Like, elections changed, people change, but systems, they don't change when they're in place this long. And it's far too often, in so many towns in Georgia, there's scenarios like this. And people think they're doing themselves a service by saying, oh, I'm going to just vote for this person every time, because that's who I vote for every year. And oftentimes you're cutting your own legs off and under them when you're in situations that are not so promising or not so, not so sweet. Or you got a nephew or a niece in a situation that's not so pleasant. And you wonder, like, oh, the judge did this, the judge did that. Oftentimes the clerk controls everything. And that's what a lot of people miss out on. A lot of people want to blame the prosecutors. A lot of people want to blame the detectives and investigators. A lot of people want to blame the judges and the juries. But at the end of the day, the clerk controls the clerk has more power in that courthouse than most people even know, because they control what happens in real. Because what's happened in the real world, what happens on news headlines, what happens on social media, if it's not in the record, it never happened. And if you're the person who controls what goes in and what comes out and what you have more power than the judge itself, right? So let's get down to the events of this and how the clerk ends up with so much power in the situation. So on March 4, 2020, Dexter was arrested in Bibb County, right? We have dockets, we have warrants, we have all that, right? Now let's say this carefully. Venue and jurisdiction are record-based determinations. They aren't vibes. They aren't narratives. They aren't news headlines. They're not viral social media posts. They are paper. And Georgia courts have been clear. Venue must be shown by the record. And that's why cases like State versus Germany, 246 Georgia 455 matter, because venue must be proven. Now, in this Germany case, it was mostly talking about the validity of the plea, but in that precedence, venue, or aka jurisdiction, was critical. And that's what set precedents in every case going forward since 1980. Now, Here's where the clerk enters the story, right? So if Bibb County later dismissed or had lack of jurisdiction, that's just not a phone call. That's not something that Bibb County just calls and say, hey, look, we dropped the charges against Dexter. No. It has to go on the record. Now, Dexter got locked up on March 4th. Houston County issued a warrant on March 5th. Dexter got transferred to Houston County. On March 12th, they started seizing property. Now, here's the kicker right here. Now, we're going to go on to show that, look, on the 12th, they start seizing property. Before he's even been indicted, before adjudication, the civil machine was rolling. I'm going to show you. Here's a copy of his civil docket. And there's a bunch of screenshots, and I really can't go through it because this civil docket is to the T. This civil docket has every entry like it's supposed to be ran. Legally and ethically, right? Every entry, every time. Everything's within time. They're running, right? Everything. But the criminal docket, that's where we have issues. But it draws concern or poses, it makes you ask the question is, how did you run forward on the civil docket, full force, and your criminal docket has holes in it? Criminal docket, like I'm showing you, and there's some things on here that's not there. Like there is no mentioning of Bibb County dropping the charges on this indictment. If he was arrested in Bibb County and they used the Bibb County arrest to get the warrants in Houston County, and then Bibb County later drops the charges, but it's not shown on the record, guess what? It never happened. And here's the funny thing about it. Dexter didn't find this out until after he was convicted. Yeah, I got the letter right here. It's dated December 2021. Dexter got convicted in November 2021. So he would have known that had it been on the record. But this man didn't find this out until he started digging into his file, digging into this case, working towards his appeal. He didn't find out they dropped the charges in Macon exactly 1 month and 4 days after his arrest, April 8th, while he's sitting in the Houston County Jail with no knowledge of this. And Bibb County had to record that incident. The Bibb County clerk sent here's a letter. Bibb County clerk. So Bibb County clerk, they recorded it. They said they no longer had jurisdiction. The case is dismissed. Houston County has it. At that point, that should have been put in the docket because then it brings into question, how did they get a March 5th warrant if they didn't have venue? If Dexter was in custody in Bibb County on March 5th, how did they get a warrant? Who controls jurisdiction? Who controls what the judge sees? Huh? Because if you look at the warrant at the top, it doesn't say anything about Houston County. It says the state of Georgia. But if the clerk put it in the file like that so the judge can see it, instead of putting it in Bibb County where it actually was, and he would have had no choice but to shoot it down. But she put the state of Georgia. The clerk is in charge of filing these things. The clerk is in charge of what the judge sees. And the fact that Bibb County dropped the charges on April 8th and it doesn't reflect in the file, the judge don't think it ever happened. In essence, in case law, it didn't happen. This is the power of the clerk by leaving that one piece of paper out. And then here's the kicker. They dropped the charge on April 8th. Dexter doesn't get indicted to November the 3rd. So 8 months after his arrest, the charges are dropped by the arresting county, but then he's indicted by the neighboring county 8 months later with no initial charge. And Houston County doesn't have a charge. He didn't get arrested in Houston County. How do they don't have jurisdiction. But if the clerk don't put it in the file, if the clerk is not impartial and put everything in the file, the judge only sees what it needs to see. Or the judge only sees what the clerk has put in there. And that's fact, right? So if the record is then showing one jurisdiction dropping something, how does another jurisdiction later build this narrative without the record being front and center? These people went on an 8-month smear campaign. Kingpin, Mexican cartel, 40 keys, $250,000. That's all you hear. They pushing that narrative. And they're pushing it, and when you think about it, what is it doing? Killing the jury pool. In Houston County where the crime didn't even occur at. Because we all know a jury in Macon in Bibb County versus a jury in Houston County is two different things. If you know, you know. Because the only way a appellate court judge can review the truth if the truth is in the transmitted record. And see, that's the same thing when it comes down with appeal. And that's just like Dexter didn't find out a lot of these things, and we're going to get down deep. He didn't find out to his appeal. People are asking me, people are coming up in the comments, well, where's his lawyer? Man, he got a shitty lawyer. This. Dog, you got a 50-year sheriff, you got a 30-year judge, you got a 50-year clerk, and you got a 30-year clerk who's under the guys or been groomed by the 50-year clerk. And the same thing when you think You think about, you don't think Bo Adams knew Judge Nunn? You don't think he didn't come up under the tutelage of him? They all right there in connection. We already know Moulton come right up under the sheriff of the county, right? And now we got Terry Childress, who definitely came up under the tutelage of Carolyn Sullivan. So it's essentially you got four of the same people doing it. It's common practice, and it brings the question of concern: Are they? Is it law or is it practice or is it system? Because of the continuity that has gone on in House and County, right? And so you think about it. If his lawyer, if these people dropped the charges in April and they went on to convict him and nobody found out to his appeal, do you think his lawyer knew? And his lawyer, and a lot of people say, well, he should have got a lawyer from House and County. Okay, all right, okay. You think they're going to go against the system? You think they're going to go against that machine? You ask yourself, would you, if you were in that situation? No, because then they're going to blackball you, ostracize you, X you out of the whole clique, right? So it's difficult to try cases when you're in places like this. Trust me, I'm from a small town. I know how it works with long tenure people in office. And then the thing about it is they justify it by elected officials because people just vote for them because that's who they've always voted for. So yeah, I'm just going with them. That's my mama didn't vote for them, I'm voting for. We're creatures of habit. That's a true fact. So if we're creatures of habit in our voting habits, what do you think the people that you actually voted for? You think they're just all of a sudden going to be neutral when they've been doing the same thing for 30 years, had to held the same position for 50 years? You think somehow they're going to just, okay, I'm unbiased. I'm not going to have some traits, some redundant habits or repeated systems I put in place? That brings into question. It makes you think, right? So, okay, all right, here, the civil machine starts before the criminal machine even goes, bro. So on March 13th, a TRO, temporary receiver order, the clerk accepted, stamped it, Carol Sullivan. That's what on March 13th, stamped it. 9 days after the arrest. Ready, the civil machine is going. Ready to ride. Watch this closely. On March 13th, 2020, an ex parte civil action is filed. Order appointing a temporary receiver and granting TRO. It's a civil action, it's ex parte, and it's accepted and entered by the clerk. What that means is they going after the property without Dexter, ex parte, without Dexter knowledge, without anybody's knowledge. They doing this, going straight to the judge. We ain't letting the defendants know. We going after this property. So, and this is why it matters. This civil seizure apparatus is activated before any House and County indictment, any jury findings, or any adjudication of guilt. So you've got a machine running early based on allegation, right? And the clerk's role here is not passive. She ain't passive. The clerk accepted the filing. The clerk created a separate civil docket. The clerk preserved the case parallel to the criminal matter. Now, let's pause right there for a minute. Because what happened if the criminal foundation shifts later, or the charges get dropped, or the venue is questioned, or indictments change, but the civil record stays consistent or stays insulated? That insulation doesn't happen by magic, people. It happens through how the clerk maintains and transmits the record. Then you have major appellate intervention. On April 21st, 2020, the Georgia Court of Appeal granted an emergency motion. It vacate order permitting sale and liquidation of assets and staying proceedings, but leaves the receiver and TRO in place. So let's call it what it is. The Court of Appeal telling the lower court, man, hey, you got too much dip on your chip. You need to slow your roll. This is jurisdiction sensitive. Hold tight, right? This is what the Court of Appeal had to come in and tell them, man, y'all need to stop. They had to come in about almost 2 months later. Now, mind you, they had to tell them on April 21st. Now, on April 8th, now again, the charge has already been dropped against them. By the time the Georgia Court of Appeal issued this order, the charges were dropped unbeknownst to him, unbeknownst to the file, so it don't exist, that the charges were dropped in Macon, Georgia. But they proceed to go on to take this property. They proceed to go on and indict him, right? Let me tell you how fast this civil machine was running. By the time Dick got the trial in October 2021, all his property and assets were sold. So that brings into question, can we just sold this man property, 51 houses and over 70 vehicles from his car dealership. We just sold all this man property, and now we got him in court. And what if he get off? What if he find out guilty? What are we gonna do about his property? Makes you wonder, don't it? And you're gonna see what makes you wonder how this case transpired when it gets down to the trial. We getting the whole tight with it. So here we go. So in this case, Deck has two indictments. Deck has the original indictment, right? The one he got indicted on in November 3rd, 2020, right? That's the one he sat in the county jail for 8 months after Bibb County dropped the charges. So I'm wondering how you get indictment when the initial county dropped the charges, but we'll get into that later. But all this has to be on the record. The charge, the warrant, the location. You got to have the details. Not in the record, it didn't happen. You just can't make up a vague, random statement like in the state of Georgia. And you live in your jurisdiction is only in Houston County, but you got on the warrant, state of Georgia. See, these things are critical, but people may look at it like, oh, those are just semantics. Not in law. Law is black and white. There's no semantic. There's no gray area, right? So, okay, let's get on to these indictments. All right, you got the first indictment, which is case number 2020 C-55430-8. That's the original indictment with all the co-defendants on it. You know what I mean? It's his family, a lot of the people that he don't even know, right? This the indictment where they say he's the kingpin. This the indictment say, hey, we caught him with 40 keys and $250,000 in Bibb County on this indictment, right? Then this is what they do. And there's a lot of more stuff we can get into as far as we don't get into the statutory deadline. But again, speedy trial, they violated speedy trial, and we got proof they violated speedy trial. But speedy trial is nothing compared to the other discrepancies that New Media has found in this docket, in this whole case file. So I would get into speedy trial, but speedy trial can get confusing. You feel what I'm saying? I'm gonna leave speedy trial up to Dexter Williams' defense team, and I can break it down a little bit, but I don't want to confuse you and see you get caught up because he essentially, let me tell you, speedy trial. You have two rights to speedy trial, right? You have a constitutional right to speedy trial and you have a statutory right to speedy trial. What does that mean, Lamar? All right, constitutional right to speedy trial, and it's all about a clock. It's the time that your clock starts. Constitutional starts at the time of arrest, right? And you got a right to a speedy trial from the date of your arrest, constitutionally, right? Then you have a statutory speedy trial that starts after the date of indictment. But all this stuff has to be documented. When does the clock start? If he's arrested on March 4th in Bibb County, but then you get the warrant for March 5th in Houston County, when does the constitutional clock start? You see what I'm saying? Because in this case, in Houston County, it starts on the 5th. In the indictment, it starts on the 4th. But really starts December 9th. But then the investigative report starts on November the 1st, 2019. The indictment starts on December the 9th. So if you use the investigative report and use as a predicated acts to get your wiretap, why is it not in the indictment? That's another thing. There's a lot of discrepancies. And guess what? The clerk is supposed to be on top of all this stuff. All this stuff is supposed to be notated in the file. Because if you got the first page on the investigative report say 11/1, but the first date on the indictment, both indictments is December the 9th. You see what I'm saying? If I'm a guy with 7 PhDs from YouTube University can see it, why the hell the goddamn clerk of 30 to 50 years can't see it? Makes you wonder, right? Damn sure make me wonder. So on November 20, Houston County indicts case number 2020 C-55430-8. But later, parallel indictment numbers appear as 55430 and 56788. All right. On 56788, Dexter was indicted on October the 12th. They didn't file it into court until October the 28th, because this is what they did. They dropped the original indictment, 55430, and they re-indicted it on 56788. See, when you can't just drop and then they recharge it with the exact same charge. They pretty much copied and pasted the first indictment and put it on another indictment. You know why? I don't know why. Maybe we need to ask the clerk. Why did they do that? Ask the judge. Why is it like that? And again, why is it not in the file?